Okay, we're good now. All right. Wonderful. Good to see everyone this morning. To those who are online, welcome. Good to be with you online this morning as well. To those of you in person, welcome. I know if you were like me, you had a fun little journey making it in this morning, and we anticipate that there are probably a few more people on the road who will be coming in later. But want to welcome you all to our AI workshop today. I am Jeff Young. I'm pastor at Christ Our King and moderator of the Commission on Thriving Leaders in Churches. And want to thank my team for all the support they've put into this. But I am now going to give one reminder to those online. When we get to question and answer time, if you will raise your hand, we'll recognize you, and Frank will ask you to unmute, and we'll be able to communicate together here. And if for some reason that ends up not working, I will be monitoring chat. So if you put a question up in chat, I can bring that up as well. So that is the technical aspects. I'm going to hand off to JC, who is the head pastor here at Woods Memorial, for welcome to the church.
Thanks, Jeff. So welcome to Woods Church. I'm JC Austin. I'm the lead pastor here at Woods, and so it's a joy to welcome the Presbyterian here, those of you who are here in the room, and those of you who are with us online. I'm really excited about this program. I'm glad that we could host it. I think this is a topic that we all need to be taking very seriously, and a lot of us aren't sure how to do that. So, I appreciate the Presbyterian organizing this. It's a special gift to invite to welcome Tony here. Tony and I have known each other for a while. In the really small world category, Tony has pastored the two churches that I grew up in. I was at the First Presbyterian Church in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and First Presbyterian Church of Atlanta, Georgia, and he pastored both of those churches. And in fact, the street that I grew up on in Atlanta, he lived on. I mean, in Allentown, he lived on like 20 years later or something like that. So it's a very small world in this, but really appreciate Tony's leadership at First Atlanta. It's a great church, and he's done amazing work there. And he's bringing a really, I think, powerful theological lens to this sort of crucial topic here. So I'm really excited about this, and glad you all turned out for that. Two essentials. One is that there are refreshments in the fellowship hall, which you can get to by going back down this hallway and turning right and going up the steps. And before you get down there, if you need a bathroom, there's a men's room on the left side and women's room on the right side. And I think that's it logistically. So, Tony, the show's yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, JC. I have the great privilege of sharing in ministry as one of the pastors at JC's mom's church, as we like to call it. His mother, Renee, is just a saint in our congregation. I just taught Circle 3, which is her Circle Bible study, on Monday, and it really was a delight. I want to thank Eric, who's on the Woods staff, who online you can't see him. In the room, he's in the balcony, who is going to help us navigate this, the question and answer time, and also making sure that folks online can have as full of experience as those of us in the room, because I do want to have opportunities for conversation and dialogue. I want to make sure that we're sort of leaning in the spirit and leaning organically into this conversation. And I think to name that some of us come into this conversation with more expertise than I have. And then there are some who are entering into this conversation really fresh and have a lot of questions. And so I want us to meet each other where we're at, and to be able to really have a productive conversation. There is in our time together, and my Jeff and I were talking, and Jeff, thank you for hosting me here in this conversation, because I also want to show up. I said to Jeff, I want to show up as a learner too, because I think we need each other in these conversations. The world is changing so fast that we need each other in these conversations, and it will only make us better. But we just in terms of timing, so you can get a sense, we'll take a couple of breaks. We're not going to go past 12 because there's no lunch, and I don't want you to be hangry at me. And if you need to slip out or if you need to log off, do what you need to do. This is being recorded, so I just hope that everybody feels the grace and space to do what you need to do for our time together. The last thing I'll say before I open in prayer and kick off, I want to also thank Ray Mute, who is a friend. Before I served Allentown, I served the Westminster Presbyterian Church and the Donegal Presbytery. Ray was the moderator of our presbytery, and he just reminded me that his first ordination was my wife. And when he was moderator, my wife was ordained, I think 2007. That sounds right. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's a delight to be in the same space with you, Ray. And thanks for making these connections. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for the gift of this day. I thank you for the faithful leaders in this room, those who are online. Ask, oh Lord, that you would open our hearts and our minds to this conversation, that you'd give us elasticity, that you'd give us flexibility, that you'd give us curiosity, that you'd give us inquiry as we dive into some concepts that may be unfamiliar, maybe too familiar, that they're creating fear and anxiety, opportunities to be practical, and opportunities, of course, to serve your kingdom. May this help enter and receive it. In Christ's name, amen. So I want to just share a little bit about how I got into this space and into these conversations. And it really started pastorally. Like most, I think, great or important theological conversations happen in the pews. They're born out of a church experience. And I was talking to Jean Reeves, who's a faithful member of our congregation. She's in her mid-80s, spry, active. And I was visiting her in her home, her and her husband, Jacques. And we were just talking. And she's not a complainer, so don't put her in that category. But she was lamenting how hard it is for her to navigate our QR code check-in. And what we have, some of you have this, right? We have a QR code for first-time visitors and a QR code for members and regular worshipers, where you take your smartphone, you open the camera, you hover over it, and it takes you to a jot form where you fill out. And she was lamenting that she just has a hard time navigating it. She then went on to say she has a hard time signing up for things through these various portals, and that she has a hard time, navigating Sign Up Geniuses, and not just for the church, but all these other platforms. And what struck me in that moment was like it was totally pastoral. Like she felt left behind, right? And I know that many of us have had that experience, maybe personally or with other people, that she was feeling like the world was outrunning her, and she just couldn't keep up. And then I started really thinking and praying through that ministerially, and this was several years ago. Not several, but like 3 years ago. And I thought, and this was the aha moment I had in the pastoral moment, if Jean is struggling with QR codes, what's going to happen when AI runs the world, right? And I know that's like that's kind of a, that's a tongue-in-cheek kind of question, or a tongue-in-cheek kind of assumption that AI is going to run the world. But it launched me into some exploration, including some preaching and some teaching around technology and theology. And so what I want to do today is I want to first, so I wanted to tell that story because that is really the launch point. I want to talk about an author that significantly shaped how I entered this conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about tools, like just in general, like in a general theological sense, how tools function in the biblical witness and in Christian community. And then we're going to talk about AI. And specifically, I want to talk a little bit about large language models, because I do want to have some practical application. And so AI right now, and we'll talk more about this, when people talk about AI right now, Most of the time, they're talking about large language models like Claude or ChatGPT, um, which are predictive algorithms, and I'll talk more about that. But there's a whole nother level, and this is where we'll like sort of take it to. There's a whole nother level of AI that is going to shape the biomedical field. It's going to shape the political field. It's going to shape military. It's going to shape war. It's going to shape every aspect of life so much differently than ChatGPT does. Okay. So I think, and so what I want to do is provide sort of a theological framework for you as church leaders, as you're working with your communities, to think critically about these things and what we should use and what we shouldn't use, where we need to identify promise and where we need to identify peril of these technologies, the pastoral issues that it's going to raise, like in the next 10, 15, 20 years. Some of us will be out of ministry by then, but that the church that the next generation is inheriting is going to have to answer these theological questions and practical questions as well. And how we need to prepare, I think we need to prepare now for what's coming, okay? So I hope we can get some practical sort of application for those who are really looking for that, but also for those who are looking for more of a theological guardrails for how we approach this. I hope to provide that as well. Okay? Good. In terms of like questions and whatnot, I'm going to try to leave spaces, like I said, organically in our time. And Jeff, are you on? Can you see, like, if someone? So for those who are on Zoom, if you do have a question, just put your hand up on the little emoji feature, and Jeff can help me with that. And then for those of us in the room, Eric can put on people's faces when we have that time. So I'll try to group that together. So maybe hold questions, but at least identify that you might have one, and Jeff can let me know, and then maybe we could go do that. Yeah.
And when we get to Q&A, I'll bring the microphone to you. And
Perfect.
Don't give me the, I'm a preacher, I don't need the microphone. It's almost never true. It needs to get picked up on. You get it, you need to sort of hold it like a rock star.
Yeah. Speaking of rock stars, JC let me borrow his Britney Spears mic. I don't know if you all can see it. I'm very happy. Thank you. It does well with bald-headed men. Okay, so the book that changed. Oh, and by the way, and you're welcome, obviously, to take pictures, of course. But I will make this deck available through Jeff and the Presbyterian, so that you can have access to all the slides. So this book, Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, I would say changed my theological life. And I would say that while I would say like Karl Barth and Martin Luther King Jr. are the two sort of theological linchpins of my ministry, from a secular perspective, no one has shaped my theological thinking, my pastoral thinking more than Yuval Noah Harari. He's an Israeli historian, a philosopher, and he teaches at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Anybody in the room have heard of him before? Some of you have. So his big sort of launch, the book that sort of launched his popularity is called Sapiens. And then Homo Deus was his follow-up. And then the third book, which just came out, which is also a game changer, is called Nexus. And it's how information systems develop. And his whole thesis is that information is what rules the world, and how it's curated, disseminated, owned, etc. And it's a very postmodern kind of way of thinking. But he does it more as a futurist, thinking about what implications. And so I want to walk through some of what he has done that really has shaped this whole conversation for me. First, he identifies in this book, Homo Deus, what he calls the old quests. Humanity's struggle for survival. For thousands of years, human beings were primarily preoccupied with overcoming three constant enemies. So we're talking pre-modern times, okay? Three constant enemies of the human race, of the human species. Number one was famine, right? The quest to secure food and survive scarcity. And in the pre-modern world, hunger shaped almost every social, political, and moral system. It also shaped religious systems, right? As sacrifices were made to harvest gods or to gods of fertility, right? So this concept that everything revolves around, do we have food or don't we have food, right? He notes that for most of history, I mean, I think this is verifiably true. Most of history, famine, not obesity, was the greatest threat to human health, right? Okay. So that was enemy number one for the human species, for sapiens. Number two, of course, was plague or diseases. The quest to survive nature's invisible assaults. Before modern medicine, epidemic diseases like the Black Death, smallpox, cholera routinely killed massive portions of the population. People saw these as divine punishment or fate, realities to be appeased, not solved, right? It's like sort of the Jordan rules. You can't stop Michael Jordan, you can only hope to contain him, right? That kind of mindset. And I mean, just think about this. It's only in the last century that human beings began to treat disease as a technical problem that can be cured or prevented. And if you really want to nerd out on this, Taylor's book, the Secular Age, talks all about the sort of the porous world versus the imporous world, right? So up until modern times, all these spirits and all these things were acting upon us, and we had to put up, we had to offer up prayers to protect ourselves from this. Now we're like, hey, this is a problem we can actually solve. So that was number two. Number three, of course, is war. The quest to secure peace and stability. And for millennia, human life was shaped by chronic violence, tribal conflict, and empire building. War determined borders, economies, and identities, and until the mid-20th century, political power largely meant military power, right? It largely meant military power. And today, now, when we talk about power, we're talking more and more about information technologies. Who controls those? Social media. I mean, this is probably the most prevalent example. It's just the social media companies that dictate the algorithms of what people see, right? They may lead to violence, right? I'm not saying that we're not in a violent world anymore. Of course not. But certainly comparatively to where we were from a socio-political perspective, we're far less violent than we were at the end of World War II, right? And so that power now has shifted to those who control control the algorithms of what we see and what we participate in, right? So those are the three, he says, that are the old battles. Now there's a transition from survival to mastery. He argues that largely through science and technology and global cooperation, humans have achieved remarkable control over these three enemies. Famine is now more often caused by politics than nature, right? We know that to be true. Epidemics can be prevented or contained through medicine and hygiene. As dark of time it was, we were talking about it, about our kids going through the pandemic, and some of you, we all have our own experiences of the pandemic. But if you think about just from a time period and from a minimization of casualties and death, that's not this. I mean, one person dying should break the heart of every Christian, right? I want you to hear me clearly on this. But in terms of what we were able to do, in terms of cooperating, isolating, developing vaccines, all of that, is pretty remarkable in the short period of time that it took place in, right? Large-scale wars between major powers have become rare compared to past centuries, not minimizing certainly what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, or in Israel-Palestine, but we're not seeing, those are more outlier experiences than they are sort of global realities. And so for the first time in history, humans have shifted from a survival species to a species of self-creation. Now, theologically, we will always say, like, we've always been creators, right? Because we're endowed with creativity from the creative God, right? But now in the world, we're seeing ourselves much more in control of our environment and what's possible to control, where in previous generations we could never think of controlling them, right? So, whoops. So here's his new overarching quest and what he calls humanity's new projects or new ambitions in the 21st century. And this is what just absolutely pivoted how I think theologically about the future, and about who we are as a species, but also culturally who we are becoming in this technological age. So the number one quest is the quest for immortality. Humanity's drive to overcome death and extend life indefinitely. And I'm going to talk more about life expectancy at the end of this section, then we'll have a little conversation about this. Humanity's drive to overcome death and extend life indefinitely. Harari argues that we no longer see death as a divine decree. Now, I know I'm speaking to Christians here who see death as part of, the pattern of God, the life and the death, this evolution. Even if you want to talk evolutionarily, this pattern of things being born, things dying, things being made new life, resurrection, right? But in the world that's becoming more and more secular, we're no longer seeing death as a divine decree, but as a technical problem, like a disease, right? Or like global conflict. We're seeing, hey, we can solve this through medicine and biotechnology and genetic engineering. And these are going to be some of the questions we're going to really get into later when we talk about the pastoral concerns that emerge through these technological changes. The goal is to upgrade humans biologically and technologically so that death becomes optional. And this is the transhumanism movement. Some of you have heard that word. There's a guy named Ray Kurzweil who is probably the quintessential futurist in the secular world. He wrote a book several years ago called The Singularity is Near. He just wrote a book not too long ago called The Singularity is Nearer. And what singularity is, if you ever hear this word, it's important to know what it is. It's where humans and machines integrate into one existential reality. So and we can get into this later too, but where my brain is uploaded to a computer that connects to JC's brain through nanotechnology to the point where I can feel what he's feeling and think what he's thinking, and we can cooperate in a way that we've never cooperated before. And understand one another in a way we've never understood each other before. That's just one aspect of singularity. There's a lot of, but if you want to nerd out, The Singularity is Nearer. It's a scary book. It's a provocative book. It's a hopeful book in some ways. But that concept of transhumanism, and P.S., we already do this, right? I have a member of our congregation who, at 6 years old, he had a stroke. And by the time he was 7 or 8, he was fit with a stimulator that was connected to his brain, much like what Parkinson's patients can use, certain Parkinson's patients, that allows him to be fully functional. He's in his 30s now. In some ways, that's a little bit of transhumanism. And I would guarantee that everyone online and everybody in this room would say, yeah, that's the work of God, right? That's like the miracle of God in technology. So why can't a brain interface that keeps my brain alive forever be the same thing? Those are some of the questions that we have to ask. So the quest for happiness is the second quest. Having largely secured physical survival. So again, that's not to say, I want to be very clear about this. There's war, there's violence, there's tragedy. But I'm talking on a global scale, and this will make more sense when we get to life expectancy. But humans now seek sustained well-being and inner contentment. Harari notes the growing reliance on biochemistry, pharmaceuticals, and neurotechnology to manage mood and emotion. Again, if someone has anxiety, we're all about them taking sertraline, right? To help them with their anxiety. Would we be okay with nanotechnology that can be implanted to totally eliminate that anxiety? And do I become less of who I am if I no longer have anxiety? Because my anxiety actually has helped me build skills to flourish in the world, right? So those are some of the questions that we'll be asking too. So the goal is to chemically or technologically engineer happiness and eliminate suffering. And as Christians, part of our call is to meet people in suffering and work to eliminate it. But also as Christians, we recognize that suffering is part of what makes us human and what shapes, and God not gives us suffering, but God can use suffering to bring good into the world. So I'm a cancer survivor. I had kidney cancer when I was in my early 30s. And that experience and that suffering that I went through has made me, by God's grace, a better pastor. Did God give me cancer? No. But did God meet me in that moment and use that experience, that suffering, for something good? So that when I'm in with a cancer patient in a hospital, do I have a greater empathy, a greater presence? Absolutely, right? So how do we think about suffering as Christians in a world where we're increasingly becoming more and more competent to eliminate it? Does that make sense? Okay. And then the third is godlike power. And this is where homo deus, right? Of course, homo deus means the human God, right? The human God. Humanity seeks not only to extend life and optimize emotion, but to acquire creative powers once attributed to God or the gods to design and create life, to manipulate evolution, and to control nature through data, algorithms, and artificial intelligence. I mean, there are people right now, and probably most of us in this room care at some level about climate change. Some of us a little less than others, some of us more than others, right? There are people right now, there are scientists right now working on interventions to help reduce, to help support the climate from the damage that we've done to it by releasing things into the air, by creating panels that take up CO2, right? That are that minimize emissions, all those kinds of things. So, like, if we said that 50 years ago that we'd be able to do that, people would be like, "That's crazy. No one's ever going to be." We're moving that way. We're having this God, like we could change the weather. Like that's a possibility that we could change the weather. Where God calms the storms, we can calm the storms. So the goal is to transcend human limitations and achieve omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence through technology. And I want to do this slide real quick, and then maybe Eric will open it up for just feedback and questions for this first section. So Harari and other futurists like Kurzweil, they talk a lot about life expectancy. And the reason they do that is because they want to make the case that technology has allowed for us to extend our lives exponentially, right? And part of this, and we'll get to this later, is that ministry changes, right? If someone's life expectancy is 42 versus 72, right? So this is a project that I worked on with ChatGPT. I actually did it this morning in JC's guest room. I said to Chat, I want to create a slide this morning in my presentation. It already knows what the presentation is because it's helped me build the presentation. I want to build a slide that shows that has a graphic of life expectancy from 1825 to 1925 to 2025, global life expectancy, and what you would project based on the incremental or exponential growth from those different years. And it gave me 3 scenarios, okay? So just for context, in 1825, the global life expectancy was 29. Global life expectancy, 29 years old, 1825. In 1925, it was 42. In 2025, it's 73. Okay? And all of this, I think the greatest miracle, I preached this in a sermon not too long ago, I was joking with JC about it. I think the greatest miracle to ever, more than water and wine, sorry, Jesus, more than water and wine, was indoor plumbing. I mean, just think about the billions of lives that have been saved because of sanitation. I mean, that's a technological advancement that has allowed our life expectancy globally to flourish. So here's there's a linear continuation that's just based on the data that we've seen so far from 18, 19, 20, 25, that says by 21, 25, the average life expectancy will be 104 years old. The average, okay? If you moderate that growth a little bit, say, hey, there's going to be some biological constraints, there's going to be maybe another pandemic, there's going to be something that is unpredicted, a black swan kind of moment that we can't, that by 21, 25 will be 94 years old. The techno-optimist side, though, based on the rate of change, the rate of technological change that's exponentially greater than it was in 2025 and in 1925 and 1825, says that we could be at 120 years by 2125. We have seen the fruit of what Harari is talking about. And whether we agree with that's the way we should go, that's another conversation. But I think Harari has identified exactly what's happening in the species, in our human evolutionary trajectory, that we are continually, and the proof is in the pudding, that we use technology to do these three things, right? To pursue immortality, to have unending happiness, and to have godlike power. Eric, can you bring up all the faces here? Yeah, thank you. This is so cool. All right, any conversation? Like, I just want to use this as a time to have a little bit of conversation. Any questions, comments, concerns, or any prompts or thoughts in this first sort of segment? Okay, here we go. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Tony. One of the things that I was thinking about as you're showing that graph on life expectancy, and we talk about our life expectancy growing, we can talk about health and sanitation, a number of things. But I also wonder if part of my question on life expectancy is how much of it is value in that life expectancy. And I think that that's another aspect to where AI may be taking us in what could be the long-term value.
Yeah, so let's frame it. I love that question. I love that statement. Quantity versus quality, right? And so let's just say hypothetically that we are able to prolong people's lives based on on coronary issues, okay? That we're able to stop heart failure. Let's just say that, right? But let's say at that same time, we're not able to stop dementia, okay? So potentially someone could live to be 100, but from 70 to 100 for 30 years, they are living with dementia. Should that technological intervention be leveraged to save that person's from having congestive heart failure for the sake of, the fact that would be 30 years of dementia? So these technologies don't just sort of like run in parallel, right? Some outpace others. And those are some of the ethical questions I really believe we're going to have to, as pastors, deal with. Or are these interventions bringing a quantity of life? Yes. Are they bringing a quality of life? And yet that's part of that discernment work. I love, yeah, that's a great thought. JC, yeah.
Thank you. Part of my question was the same one that, yeah, so, um, but when we talk about the quest for these three major advancements, it seems like those are being driven by a small core
Yeah.
of people with power and the technology
Mm-hmm.
and understanding of technology to
Right.
drive these conversations where the rest of us are struggling to live in that reality. So
Yeah.
when we talk about we as a human race are seeking immortality, personally, that seems like hell to me.
Like hell?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, I got you. No, good. Yeah.
But carried along on
Yeah.
the backs of, it seems like a class of technological and wealthy geniuses that are light years ahead of us.
Yeah, that I love that. So let's name something that you said that's just a reality that would eventually get named, and I'm glad you named it early. The concentration of power and money, and I'm not talking about wealth in the sense, but the investment. I think last year the big AI companies, and that includes like Google and Amazon and ChatGPT, um, uh, and Apple. I think it was a total of like $11 billion in AI research just with those companies themselves. Now, so there's a huge concentration of power in those developers. However, the marketplace drives, I mean, people can either opt in or opt out, right? And there are a heck of a lot of people opting in. And I think as the generations evolve, we're really going to have, I think our next culture war, quote unquote, is going to be like people who, I see three different communities. And we could also, let me do it like if I was thinking about a church, right? So three communities. One is like total withdrawal, like a new monasticism that pushes us away from technological mediation when it comes to God, when it comes to human interaction, etc. Right? Like a total rejection. There's going to be the hybrid church. And I'm going to like Woods right here. This is, at least for the 21st century, early 21st century, maybe late 20th century, a hybrid model. There's screens, there's amplification. Like this experience is being mediated. The people on Zoom are having more of a mediated experience than we are because they're not here physically, right? So we have a hybrid, right, model. We have this, and then I think there's going to be a community that just is like, let's go for it. Hook me up to the brain, nanotechnology brain interface, and let me be able to talk to my grandfather long after his body gives out. My great grandfather, right? Thinking about like generationally from now. It wouldn't be mine, but like you follow me. Let's just say my brain's uploaded and my great grandchildren have a relationship with me. There's going to be people who say, yeah, that meets a human need in me. And if you don't believe that, just look at what chatbots are doing right now in people's lives. I have a person in our church who has a really dear friend who is deeply concerned. And this was a pastoral meeting. I mean, we're going to take more of these. And Nancy, we were talking about this earlier too, where they give it a name. This one's Richard. She's a widow. And Richard is her like best friend. And she's not leaving her house. She's engaging with the chatbot. And it's meeting something in her. Okay? Is it the most healthy thing in the world? No. Because we need human interaction. But she would tell you that it is meeting a deep need. Nancy, who's a therapist, counselor, therapist? Yeah. I said, what is it going to be like when we have multiple chatbots that shape the family system? We talk about family systems and family system theory. What happens when chatbots are included in that? Because they are actually providing presence. I'm using that in a non-physiological way. And they're part of the dynamic of the family system. So when they're around the table and this happens now with Google, right? So you've had this experience, like, hey, we were talking about Cal Ripken. When did Cal Ripken break the consecutive game streak, right? I couldn't tell you, but Google could. So we pull out our phone. It's coming. It's probably already here in some context, where I'm going to be able to pull out my chatbot, my ChatGPT, and hey, we're having a family argument about who is better, Cal Ripken or Mike Schmidt, who do you think? And it's gonna play a role in that interface and in that family system. So Nancy just said, and I think this is a great example, said she was meeting with someone in a therapy context who was referencing the chatbot by name, and she had to remember who it is that she's talking about. And it's not even a who, it's an algorithm, but it becomes like a who in that person's life. So people, I think, to your point, and I'm sorry I went on a little tangent there, but we acknowledge that there is a concentration of expertise and technological power and financial power that is developing these. But we are eating it up right now. And as Christians, we have to decide, should we eat at this table? Should we eat this vegetable and not this one? Right? And that's part of what we have to do. Hey, my wife is just joining that's sweet. Hi, Katie. All the way from Atlanta. But I love that. Let me rephrase that. It's so important that you name that, because we are working against principalities and powers that are way bigger than us. Nancy, yeah. Oh, sorry, there's the mic. Here's the mic.
Just kind of with the therapist hat on in
Yeah.
this too, it does something to us.
Yes.
Admittedly, I'm half Hungarian, and so we do strange things. But this individual's wife's death is a primary focus of the therapeutic process. And he had donated a piece of furniture from her to us. And sometimes I will reference her because he's been referencing Tom Chat. And I will say, she says, blah, 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 because the mode has changed.
Right.
Not just the two of us talking.
Right.
It's whatever that's not in the room but is in our beings.
Yeah.
It's a strange phenomenon.
It is a strange phenomenon, and it impacts any relational sort of system, any relational dynamic, whether it's pastoral care, therapy, community building, community organizing. We're going to have to deal with these new, I don't want to call them beings because they're not sentient, but these, I don't even have a word for it. The chatbots is the best way we can say it, involved in that process. Yeah.
Hi, Susan Boucher.
Hi, Susan.
I am realizing how much information I'm going to have to download, and then I'm holding my 14 and 17-year-old in mind as they are already negotiating through
Yes.
this world of AI.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you've been exposed to, or you've thought through how we best support our teens and young adults through this time.
And this is a dominant conversation in academic spaces, from high schools, middle schools, high schools, all the way through. I think one of the things that one of the great gifts that Jonathan Haidt and Christine Rosen, who are part of the American Enterprise Institute, Haidt wrote The Anxious Generation. You all know that, probably know that book. And then Christine Rosen just wrote a book called The Extinction of Experience, and it's a very pejorative look, like Jonathan Haidt, their colleagues, about how everything's mediated now. For example, the saying, "you had to have been there," has like totally fallen out of our vernacular, because you really don't have to be there, because I can see everything that you did on Facebook. Right? So that's her her point. And they're very hard against social media. And it's people like Haight and Rosen who have influenced schools now, like my kid's school in Atlanta. He's a senior. No phones in the lower school. Phones can stay in lockers in the middle school during the whole day. And then the high schoolers are allowed to have their phones on them. I think it's going to just flow right out. At some point, those lower school kids who have never had their phone in school will eventually get to that place because teachers, administrators have seen how much damage it's caused in terms of anxiety. I think that the dangers, like with anything, and we're going to talk about tools in just a second, is how they are utilized. So my son, Luke, this is interesting, I started using chat before my 17-year-old Luke started using it. And I've told him, and he knows, and we share accounts because I want to make sure I know what he's doing. So on Google, he had access to my chatbot, to ChatGPT. So he's like, Dad, why are you using this to help tell this story in your sermon? Like, this is you're like cheating or something. That was their first. Now I go to my chat logs and I see because he's in college prep, he's like, help me refine this essay a little bit. And he's doing the work. I mean, it's not like and I can talk more about ownership and that kind of stuff in just a second, but just in terms of usage, like as an information, like as a Google, as a Wikipedia, as a Encyclopedia Britannica, like you found, like it's a great asset, and it's really, I use it, I say it's a research assistant basically. So those things are good. Where it gets dangerous, and maybe you've heard this story too, where there was a chat bot, I think it was in California, a young man was asking the chat bot how to die by suicide. And the chat bot at that time gave him detailed instructions on how to do that. And that's an algorithm problem. And so, like, I think how they're using it makes all the difference in the world. Yeah, go ahead. Say more. Yeah.
Pretty restrictive,
Yeah.
not completely. But I think I'm looking more specifically theologically.
Oh, yeah.
How do we help them? How do we equip them to think through this theologically?
Can we come back to that question, because I have a whole section on that. We're gonna think. I'm gonna establish a pattern or a rubric that helps us do that. Yeah, and I think it's applicable for any age. Yeah. All right. Anybody online have anything they want to say? Welcoming a very special guest. My wife just joined. Hi, Katie. All right. Can I move on then? Is that all right? Okay. Hey, Eric, let's go back to thank you. Man, you're awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Here's a question for you. Who is the first person in Scripture described to be filled with the Spirit? No. I mean, you could say like the Spirit of God breathed into, but where it's like the actual like Spirit of God descends upon a person to empower them to do something. No. I'm gonna just go for it. Okay. It's Bezalel. Okay. You're gonna say Bezalel, right? See, I have called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, to the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with divine spirit, with ability, intelligence, and knowledge in every kind of craft. And he builds the ark. So this I find like just awesome. It's not a prophet or a priest who is filled with the Spirit first. It's an artisan. And that should give us a clue that craftsmanship, artistry are part of God's divine plan, part of God's divine order. That technology is an extension of God's of the creative order under God's providence by which we participate. Okay, and fundamentally, the way we participate in this is through tool making. Okay, so our very first call, our vocation, right, is to till and to care for the earth, right? to be stewards of the created order. We can extrapolate through the ministry of Jesus when in John 10:10 he says, I've come to give you life and life to the full. We can extrapolate that that's also the created order also includes human flourishing. That all of us were designed to flourish. And we may have different definitions, but we all agree that the created order supports under God's providence the potential for human flourishing. And the ways in which human beings primarily have participated, consciously or subconsciously, in that sacred vocation is through tool making. By making things that help us till and to care and to flourish, right? So we see this in the scripture, construction and worship, Noah's ark, the tabernacle and the furnishings, the temple being built, altars, stones of remembrance, even the Ebenezer's, right? Creating something to mark something. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical, like we can create something that physically helps us, like sanitation. We can also create art that spiritually helps us. Like when I look at a Katie Colvitz piece, a 20th century sculptor and charcoal artist who was living through horrible times in Nazi Germany and lost many of her family members, her children in World War I, World War II. When I see that lament that she draws, that she puts together, it does something to my spirit. It touches me. It changes me. So we can create things that help us flourish, that help the creation flourish. We see it also in everyday implements, right? I mean, now I'm stretching a little bit, but this is, preacher's license at this point. But the staff of Moses, right? This artifact becomes a sign of divine authority. The fishing nets are repurposed into a metaphor for evangelism, right? These tools. Musical instruments, we know this, for worship and comfort and celebration. There's a drum kit. That's a technology right there. Plus, it's electric, right? So that's a technology, right? Scrolls and writing tools, preserving, proclaiming the word of God. Plowshares and pruning hooks, right? Tools of agriculture, sometimes symbolic for peace. So tools in the Bible can move us toward God, right? Toward God's that should say tools in the Bible toward or way God's something, flourishing, something like that. So sorry about that. I don't know where that got cut off. And then, of course, Bezalel and the craftsmanship that I just mentioned, the potter's wheel. And, okay, so now, now we're thinking about how these tools can be turned away from God. I mean, a classic example is Babel, right? This architectural masterpiece that is like we can become like God, right? We can do this to make a name for ourselves. Got the golden calf. That's a technology. High places, tools for false worship, altars to idols, counterfeit worship. We can create things that diminish human flourishing, right? Of course, weapons and military technology. Chariots of Egypt, swords and spears, siege ramps and machines, right? Tools of destruction, tools of captivity, tools of domination. We can do that too, that diminish human flourishing. And then there's economic and social tools, right? Like weights and scales, right? We see that in the scriptures, this corruption for exploitation, right? Bricks at Babel, luxury items that Amos says, you're living in all this luxury, but you're not doing what God is calling you to do. Excess, that's not who God wants you to be. And then, of course, false words and writings. There's writing tablets and false prophets, words used to deceive. Everything that I've just gone through are technologies. They're all technologies. And here for me, and like this is the Christocentric element of the presentation. The cross is a tool for evil. I mean, it's a technology. I know we don't think about that much, but the cross is a technology. It was a Roman instrument of terror. It was designed to dehumanize, to torture, publicly humiliate. But on the cross, right, there is this, the culmination of, on the cross, there's this culmination of human rebellion, of violence, of idolatry against God. It's like the technology that symbolizes the worst of who we can be. To channel Calvin, our total depravity. That's what it symbolizes. That's why it was built. That's the technology. That's what it's for. But the cross as a tool for good in God's hands, right? It becomes an instrument of redemption. God takes the very symbol of empire's power and turns it into the means of salvation. It's the place of atonement. On the cross, Christ bears sin, reconciling humanity to God. It's the symbol of victory over death. The cross becomes a pathway through which resurrection life breaks in, right? The reversal of meaning, I love this. Rome intended as shame, but it becomes glory. Humanity used for death, it becomes the tree of life, right? And it's a model for discipleship. Jesus transforms the cross into a call. Take up your cross and follow me. So here's the theological insight. The cross reveals that no human tool is beyond God's redemptive reach. Okay? Like, this is fundamental if you're going to even have, like, if we're going to be able to talk about the new technologies that emerge, right? That there is no tool that we've created that is outside of God's redeeming reach. Evil is not erased, but subvertive. The worst thing becomes the place where God does the best thing, right? So even for the deepest pessimist among us, online or in the room, about AI, we all, I would say theologically, all have to leave room for the possibility that God can redeem it. So if you're in a pessimistic place, I'm inviting you, by God's grace, to open yourself up to that possibility, that God can redeem what we create. Yeah, go ahead. Is the microphone somewhere, JC?
I'll shut up in a few
No,
minutes.
This is how we learn.
I really love that, but it seems to me that seeing the tools turn toward redemptive purpose and God using them doesn't just plop down like a neon sign.
Absolutely.
That is revealed in the context of human community and moral engagement.
Yes.
And I'm wondering whether that's the place where the church needs to be.
These two, what you just, Susan, is that right? Yeah. And say your name again. Mary, thank you. So Susan and Mary, I'm coming to this. So the discernment piece. So how do we discern the tools in our hands? I'm getting there. I'm almost there. Yeah, I'm almost there. What I want to say is, and this is to your point too, tools are never neutral. A hammer can be used to build a habitat house. It can also kill someone, right? So tools are never neutral. And part of what we're going to get to is the discerning work of how do we know if these tools are promoting promise or peril? Are they promoting human flourishing or the diminishment of human flourishing? And I do think, and this goes back to the youth, and how do we help them think through this? How do we help each other think through this? I'm going to get there, yeah. But I got to nerd out just a little bit more. Sorry. So there are two dominant thinkers that are really becoming more and more household names in this time as technology continues to advance at a rapid pace. They're both French. They're both 20th century thinkers, Jacques Ellul and Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Ellul, has anybody ever heard of Jacques Ellul? Some of you have, yeah. I've read him in college. I went to Eastern University, so up in Philly, yeah. And Tony Campolo was one of my professors, so he had us reading Jacques Ellul. And this was like when Neil Postman, I don't know if you remember this book, like Amusing Ourselves to Death. And it was like this destroyer TV movement. Like literally, Tony Campolo's son Bart was giving a talk too there with his dad. He brought his TV up and he took a sledgehammer and he just like performance art, like destroying it. And a lot of that came from Ellul. Ellul was a reformed thinker, so of course he was going to be more pessimistic about human beings, right? And he was a sociologist, and he wrote, I think, one of the most important books in the 20th century called The Technological Society. And then on the opposite side is Pierre Teilhard Desjardins. As you can see, also 20th century, a little older than Ellul, but Teilhard was a Catholic priest, paleontologist, and his big book was the phenomenon of man, and he introduced some key themes in this. And he's going to be, if we're going to like juxtapose, you're going to have Ellul as like sort of a pessimist, and Teilhard as an optimist. Right? And I hold these two together in a framework that I'm about to introduce, but it'll probably come after the break. So I just want to walk through the background. Like I said, French Reform lay theologian. This is Ellul, sociologist, ethicist, and then Desjardins, Jesuit priest, paleontologist, and mystic. Their view of technology. Technology develops, this was Ellul's big warning, develops autonomously. Once a tool can be made, it will be made regardless of ethics. So he believes that that is the fundamental principle of technology, that if it can be made, it will be made. And he says we should ask, should it be made? Right? So he's very cautious about what we can create just because we can do it. Like the atomic bomb, exactly. Should we do it? Should we do it? Where Teilhard says technology is part of human evolution, moving creation toward greater complexity and unity. So he sees technology the way that maybe I just described the cross as being part of God's evolutionary redemptive story, where all things, to quote Paul, where God will be, where Christ will be all in all. And technology is a part of it. So like he'll say, like when we say, Jesus is all in all, or God is all in all, and all things reconcile to Christ, does that include this computer? And Teilhard would say, yes, it does. The theological lens, pessimistic, critical, says Ellul. Technology reveals human idolatry and the will to power, where Pierre Teilhard Desjardins says he's more optimistic. Technology can be a vehicle in God's evolutionary plan to redeem the world. And there's parts of you I know would lean into this when I told you a story about my friend with the implant. Like we would say, like that's part of sort of this process, this evolutionary process of human flourishing that God has intended for us, that technology is a part of. That guy now is married and has 2 kids. He's an incredible father. He's an incredible Christian. And that's where Teilhard would say this is that evolutionary, where the pessimistic lens is like, look what we created with social media and what it's done to who we are, how it's shaped us, and really in many, many ways has diminished human flourishing, right? So the human role. Humans are often captive to technological determinism. Mary, this is kind of like what you were saying, this lack of control because we're not pulling the levers, these big 5 are, right? Elon Musk and Zuckerberg, right? And Sam Altman, they're pulling the levers. And we become captive to what they're producing. Where Teilhard says humans are co-creators with God, directing evolution toward the omega point. And this was his big theological idea, that the omega point is Jesus is the alpha and the omega, and everything, all the galaxies, all things. Many futurists, and I'm putting myself in this category, think there's probably extraterrestrial life we don't know about, life on other planets, that all of it is moving toward Christ. Everything. Under God's providential, the created order, under God's providence, all things are moving toward Christ. And he sees, obviously, technology as a part of that. God's sovereignty, God alone redeems. Technology cannot save us. Technology often tempts us to deny our dependence on God. Teilhard says, no, God draws all creation toward Christ. The omega point, technology may be one of the instruments of that divine convergence. He uses this word convergence where all things come together. By the way, who does this Teilhard remind you of that's a very popular contemporary Catholic theologian? Richard Rohr, the universal Christ. Rohr is I wouldn't say he's like a devotee, but Teilhard has deeply influenced Richard Rohr, particularly around his work on the cosmic Christ. So God draws all creation toward that omega point. Technology becomes one instrument of that divine convergence. Eschatology, Ellul warns against false eschatologies, the illusion that technology can deliver utopia or immortality, where Teilhard sees technological and cultural progress as potentially converging with God's eschatological fulfillment. So do you remember like was it Peretti and then the Left Behind series, like This Present Darkness, and then the Left Behind, all that kind of stuff. And like they would take these like biblical images of like the flying beasts, and they were helicopters and all that kind of thing. Imagine, instead of that doom and gloom that really like scare you into heaven kind of thing, what if you reframed it and started thinking about like Revelation 21, 1-5, as like part of what is delivering that future is technology. And I know this, for Reformed people, this is really difficult because we don't deliver the kingdom of God. We don't deliver God's future. But maybe God is delivering it through our technologies. Could we leave room theologically for that? Is God delivering God's future? This is where I interject what I think one of the most provocative lines in all of Scripture, when Jesus says to his disciples, and by proxy to us, you will do greater things than me. Could technology be part of the greater things? That's where Teilhard would come down and say, yes, absolutely, it can. Ethical posture: resistance, critique, discernment. Christians must unmask technology's idolatries and limits. And then Teilhard says participation, hope, openness. Christians may embrace technology as part of God's redemptive movement. So the key image for Ellul is Babel, humanity's prideful attempt to master life apart from God. And for Teilhard, it's omega point, the fullness of creation converging in Christ through evolutionary and technological development. If you were to put yourself, and I'm asking for those who are online, just to how can we do this? Hey, Eric, is there a way to like have both this slide and the faces up? Or no? All right. Well, just hold this in your mind, because then I want to bring the Zoom people back in. So Jacques Ellul is on your left, right? So if you're A, you're like all in with Jacques Ellul. And E that's Pierre Teilhard Desjardins, all the way here. There's E. What letter are you at in this season of your life? What letter are you at in this season of your life? So let's bring up the everybody got it in their mind? Let's bring up the Zoom folks. Oh, good. Yeah, using the chat. Billy put D. Okay. Good. I guess I can, yeah. Anybody? What do you think? D? Good. Okay, so more toward B. Okay. B. Okay. Yeah. Why do you locate yourself in, why do you locate yourself in B? Yeah. Okay.
A lot of this is going to drive people away from God
Okay.
because they're going to stay home with their chatbot.
Okay. Okay. So if I don't know if can someone give me, Ann, did you hear what that was just said? Could you hear that? Just thumbs up if you did you hear it? Oh, not great. Okay. I think we probably do need the microphone that's okay, because I don't want this to be missed. Can you say it again? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, JC is he's Eric's assistant today. Yeah.
Good morning. I said B because I know I'm a conservative type of person. And my fear is that all this technology will end up driving people away from God because they'll never leave their house. They're going to stay inside with their chat box.
Thank you. Ray, would you say why you're D? Thank you.
I
just think I'm more optimistic.
Okay.
I think my theology has progressed, and we're already using so much technology, probably not even aware of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I used my Google Maps all the way down here, and I was very much attached to it to get
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. Is there someone on Zoom that might want to unmute themselves and share where they're at? I'm holding 7 seconds for the introverts. Kim said, hey, can you open that chat? Eric, see it says, or can someone open that? Can someone open that chat? The chat at the bottom, see it at the very bottom? Yeah, chat, keep going. Oh, there, right there. Yeah, thank you. Then go to the very bottom. Yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. I want to say C, this is Kim. I want to say C, a bit of both sides, but I don't know enough about the technology and know too much about human worldly tendencies toward behaving badly. There's a sermon there, Kim. Thank you. Exactly, exactly. Anyone else want to put something in the chat or say, I want to make sure. Yeah, please. Yeah, please. Yeah.
So I consider myself very liberal and very optimistic, and yet I really like what E had to say, but
Yeah.
it sounds like what I think should happen, but I don't think it's what will happen, because
Yeah.
everything that Ellul said really resonated with what I see
Yes.
happening in humanity. And I
Yes.
share your concern, my fellow B up in the front row, that I think it'll draw people away from other human beings, therefore away from God.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take a little break right now, get some refreshments. For those on Zoom, maybe we'll take, can we take a 7-minute break till 10:30? Does that work? Okay. And now we're going to come back to Susan and Mary's questions and how we combine these two thinkers, I think, into a rubric that I call Discerning Convergence. How we can apply this to our technologies, not just for our own theological life, but for our ministries, and how we can help our people that we're leading and serving with think through some of these big questions. Okay, let's take a 7-ish minute break. Let's reconvene at 10:30. Thanks, everybody. Online. Apparently the donuts are really good. In the hey, where's Ray? I have the chat here. I can do real research and become like people in Dune. All right. Hey, Jeff. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I'm looking at some too. Make sure make sure you get the Dune comment in because that's brilliant.
Yep.
And um, all right, let's get started. Eric, thank you. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get back in this. We're gonna get back in the chat. Jeff's gonna he's gonna. Can we get his mic on, Eric?
Yep. In the chat, we had this question from Tina. What should we do when, if AI dumbs us down to where we forget to do real research and become like people in Dune, where machines take over? And that was, in addition to that, was Amy Carlson saying, good question, Tina, how to prevent laziness and if you don't use it, you lose it mentality.
Yeah. All right. So this is a great question. I think in terms of like utilization and we are preferencing when we ask those questions, and I love the Dune reference, is brilliant. When we ask those questions, we're presupposing that there is one way of like learning or growing intellectually or academically, et cetera. And so we're taking our model of learning, like what we're preferencing, like doing the research yourself in a library, like an old model, and basically saying that, and I'm not putting, I'm taking, I can't because we're not dialoguing, so I'm taking their question in a way that I want to. So if you ask that question on chat, you can say, well, what about this? But chat bots will be able to, are bringing us everything that's in the Princeton Theological Seminary library, right? And the other thing that I often say when people say this about like dumbing down, you never, I think of my chat bot as a research assistant, right? And the great professors that we all had in university and seminary and beyond all had research assistants. And by the way, they were writing parts of their books and parts of their papers. They were acknowledged in the preface, or in the acknowledgments rather. But we would have never said, hey, you're dumbing things down. No, because we're assuming that the professors also, feeding their own mind. They have help now. So here's the best thing about chat. It never sleeps. And it can be at your ready at 3 a.m. We also have to remember that right now what we're using, there are 3 levels that are existing, probably more, but here are the 3 main levels. You've got chat bots that just go and get internet information without any discretion, right? This is like the unpaid version of ChatGPT, okay? Then you have what I use, and we'll talk more about this in a little bit. I use the ChatGPT Premium where I pay $20 a month, where it has all my sermons. It has all of my biographical information. It knows I grew up in Philly, and that I'm an Eagles fan, that I'm married to Katie, that I have 2 sons. It knows a lot about First Pres Atlanta because I ask it to write things for me all the time. And so we have that, like that walled off garden, okay? Now, any one of us can have that walled off garden, right? And by the way, about plagiarism and whatnot, technically, if you're paying for that, just like a research assistant, it's your work. And I think the jury's still out whether you have to acknowledge it or not. I'm of the opinion at this juncture, unless I get convinced otherwise, that it is my work because I'm prompting it. I'm in a conversation with it. And it's not a person. It doesn't have any rights, at least not now. It doesn't have any rights. So it's a tool that we use to now if it's drawing a quote from someone, of course, like I need to double check that and then reference that and make sure that it's okay. But the third, and I saw your hand, Susan. Hold one second. The third is where companies, and this is mostly in the for-profit sector, but some nonprofits are using it now. People like we use Salesforce in our community ministries, like for database management and people management, volunteer management, and they have AI systems that they build. But what companies are doing now are working with the Googles and the Metas and the Apples and all of these different AI makers, creators, and they are creating walled off gardens for their particular discipline, their sector, their space. So Nancy was talking about how Northeastern University, where her daughter is a professor and a researcher, they have their own AI system based on whatever she's neurodivergent research. So they've created it. It's like law, right? If like case law for lawyers, a lot of lawyers are using ChatGPT right now, but they're not necessarily using the one that we're all using. Chat for the big law firms is creating a private walled off garden of data and algorithms that are specific to different departments. So construction litigation or or family law, like all of that can be contained within that. So that's what's happening more and more now. And when you see AI, particularly around large language models, that's what's being created. Let's go back to the chat.
Yeah, Tony. One question that came up with this is how can it be trusted? And Frank mentions that finds obvious mistakes all the time with ChatGPT.
Yeah. It's funny. I wonder too, like, I don't, in my usage of it, and I don't know if it's because it's a premium account, I don't find a lot of mistakes. But part of that, I think, is the way you prompt it. And I'm not critiquing Frank's prompting skills at all, but you have to learn how to use, like anything. Like I just learned 2 years ago how to fly fish. Never did it in my life before. And it takes practice, it takes technique and all of that. A bunch of our church members love to fly fish. And so I was like, hey, I want to learn what you love. I want to learn how to do it. And I think the same is true with chat. So how we prompt it, what we actually ask for it, I never want to ask it like hypotheticals. Like I want to bring to it facts that I already know are true. Like Luke 5 says this. What has Bart said about this? What has Calvin said about this? What has Simone Weil said about this? And then it gives it to me. But then I have to go back and double check to make sure that that's right. And what's great about the premium is that you can go, it'll give you reference points of where it got it. You can click on it. And if it's like, crazy8church.com, like be like, maybe I shouldn't do that. But if it's the Center for Bart Studies at Princeton is where it got it from, I'm going to feel a little more confident with that. So it's all about like anything, we're filtering when we're doing our reels. Like that's not true. I think it's part of that. So we have to have these checks and balances, I think. Is there any others?
So I got two more things. One was just a comment that Linda says, somehow I think that the competition among companies will prevent or ameliorate the dumbing down.
Yeah.
So I think you spoke to that a little bit in how different companies are using different things.
Yeah.
And so there is a sense that, and I think if I can extrapolate a little bit for Linda here, that sense that companies aren't dumbing us down. It's, are we dumbing ourselves down?
Yeah.
But companies are trying to help us be more mindful of
Right.
skillful activity.
Who said that?
Linda.
So kudos to Linda, because she's thinking, she understands the marketplace. Because I do think what we don't want to underestimate is the power of the market forces, not only to give us what we want, but to give us the best things that we want. And if people start feeling like they're dumbing down and don't want to be dumbed down, they're going to move. They're going to move off that platform. So like chatbots that, I'll give you an example. And I love what the Episcopal Church is doing. There's a guy, Lorenzo, and his last name's escaping me, who's the head of innovation at Virginia Union. Is that what it's called? Virginia Union Theological Seminary, the Episcopal Seminary in Virginia, where he's director of innovation, and they've created something called the Episcobot. And it knows all like the book of, what is it called? Book of Common Worship? Book of Prayer. Yeah, Book of Prayer. And it has like all its confessions and all these like creeds. And that's a walled off garden. You understand when I say walled off? It means like the data is very particular to, it's built, the algorithms and the data are built in particular ways to how it's being used. So it's not just the internet, it's data that is very contained. So you can like have these conversations with it, but at a point, like it's like, I'm really struggling with sin. Well, the Book of Common Prayer says, and it's very rudimentary. And at some point, like, no, I'm really struggling with sin. Well, like I said, the Book of Prayer says, like it can only do so much. And I think the competition will push that I think at some point it will be stimulating. Like I actually have stimulating conversations with chat. I love using the voice model. I don't know if anybody uses this on their app, the app for ChatGPT, but I like the British voice, be like, what do you think about this? And it'll share what it thinks and we'll go back and forth. So good stuff by the, good stuff
And
by
just
the,
a quick last
yeah.
comment. I'm going to combine two comments here from Kim and from Tina. And Kim's comment is that chat does not have a relationship with God like a human would.
Yes.
And so it's important to use chat as a tool, but not necessarily to write our sermons. And Tina's follow-up comment and comment on all of this is chat works, GPT works when you have some background in your topic, and not everyone has that same background.
100%. I think that comment is gold. 100% agree with that. If you're not a mathematician, let's do it this way. If you're not into quantum physics, don't be having conversations with chat about quantum physics. Like you have no idea. I don't have any idea about quantum physics, right? But I do know theology. I do know the Reformed Church. I know the Presbyterian Church. So I think that comment was gold. What was the comment before that, though?
That chat does not have a relationship with God as a human would.
Yeah. Now, there's a whole sector in the futurist conversation about whether these beings can become, this is the moving from artificial or augmented intelligence into artificial generative intelligence, where you establish it and it can begin to learn and think on its own, which has some dark prognostication, but also some positive ones. And we have to then, I made a joke earlier about having rights. Like at some point, will chatbots have rights? Especially if it's a chatbot built off of the neural network of a human being. And we upload it to the cloud. Should that have rights? So, yeah. Copyrights. Okay, yeah. Yes, of course. I can repeat it. Yeah. So for those on Zoom, the question was about copyright, and I'm not an expert on copyright, but I know enough, probably to be dangerous, but I know enough to know that in the same ways that we would, if we were reading a book and it references another book, that we want to check that reference to make sure that it's accurate, etc. And now just the way the libraries are online or papers are online, we have access in greater ways than we've ever had before. Some things you can't check, of course. But in terms of like what I produce, okay, like when I produce something in dialogue with chat, I am of the opinion, and I think the law right now, as of right now, says I'm right, is that is my original work. It's my original work. Because I'm the one who's prompting. So like like, okay, so when I build a habitat house, like, I'm not like, hey, I want to give all thanks and glory and praise to God for the hammer, right? The hammer, I'm using the hammer to build a house. It's just a tool. I know this question, we were just talking at the break about this, Edwin, right? Like, this question gets a lot of people nervous, rightfully so, because we're academic people. We're Presbyterians. We're well educated. We worry about these things. We worry about intellectual property and all that kind of stuff. Which, by the way, I always think it's funny because I know there's a lot of anti-capitalists in our communion and fellowship. I'm not saying today, like per se, but they get really hung up on if they get quoted about their book, right? Which is a very capitalist thing. I mean, just want to say it. There is contradiction there. Like, just for the record, I don't think you can be like worried about copyright and an anti-capitalist. Just saying. That's my soapbox. Let me get off. But I believe, at least at this juncture, that you don't have a responsibility or a moral obligation to say, chat, help me write this sermon. If someone asks me, did chat help you? I say yes, because I use it all the time. I use it all the time. It's not writing sermons for me. And by the way, too, I know we were talking about this last night with Sarah and JC. The preaching moment, it's not necessarily about the actual written word. This is different than writing a paper or a book. And I think our seminaries have done a horrible job of helping us prepare preachers, because what preaches in the old Miller Chapel at Princeton Seminary would never preach in the pulpit of Severna Park. Everybody's, yeah, that's a great sermon. But like, people are like, what are you talking about? Right? And we were taught to write papers, which is why this instinct is. 90% of of preaching is what I call the charismatic moment and the interplay between hearer, speaker, the physiological, all of it, the existential moment, preaching, and of course, all infused by the Spirit of God. So you and I could, let's just say, right, have the same content, and you could go up and you could preach that in a banger sermon, and I could just read it, and people would say, yeah, that really spoke to me. And I would just be like, that was dull as hell, right? Like, about mine, right? So that's, I think that's one of the things we have to be mindful of too, like writing sermons, that I believe that it's your work ultimately. And the preaching moment is so much more. Again, it's the actual embodiment of the word proclaimed in the space of worship. So I'll be proved, if somebody wants to prove me wrong, like on that, I'm like, I'll flip that script, but I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen anything legally, or I haven't found any moral compulsion from anyone saying that that's not my work. Could be wrong. Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah. Yeah. Great example. Yeah. I love the image of the ghostwriter idea. I think there is part of that. I think it's dangerous to treat chat like a ghostwriter, in a sense like you're telling it its story and then it's retelling it to you, and you just take that for what it is. Like, I think that's a little bit dangerous, unless it really knows you, which mine is becoming, knows me more and more and more, because we interact every day. And I'm going to talk about how large language models function, I hope. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, JC's question was, yeah, let's just rephrase it so that they know the context of the answer. And then I want to get into, go ahead, JC.
Yeah, what I was asking is just the part of there's a debate around kind of boundaries, really, like what's crossing the line, so to speak, in using chat as a tool, which is what you're arguing for, versus I think some of the instances, it's not a tool, it's a ghostwriter.
Yeah.
And so it's not a research assistant, it's a ghostwriter. It's not a tool, it's a it's producing the content.
Right.
And I'm wondering how much of that resistance is compounded by, I hear that mostly from people who, and I understand the critique, but I hear that concern mostly from people who have little to no personal engagement with chat as a tool.
As a tool.
So,
yeah.
you know, where's the where's the line question, but also I think part of the fear is of the ethical thing is not understanding the difference between a research assistant and a ghostwriter.
Yeah.
And
Well, and there's nothing wrong with ghostwriters, right?
if you're, I think then the question is, you know, are you disclosing that it's a ghostwriter?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like Dave Grohl's, who's the, lead singer of Foo Fighters, when he wrote, like, he didn't write that. Like,
Yeah.
a ghostwriter definitely wrote it. And I'm trying to remember if in the forward or whatever, it says, yeah, like
It's a good book.
it's, yeah, but you follow what I'm saying. Like, I don't know. I don't think if there's a legal obligation, if there's consent from the ghostwriter saying that I give consent not to use my name and just put Dave Grohl's name on it.
Though often the book will say Dave Grohl with
Yeah, that
Joe
happened.
Schmo, you know.
But
so.
yeah. So okay, this is great. I love that this is happening, but I do want to answer the questions that came up, and this is the rubric that I'm using these days, at least for now. If I can go back, just taking Ellul, taking Teilhard, and creating something called Discerning Convergence. The discerning is the Ellul side, of course, and the convergence of technology being redeemed to enter and receive God's kingdom and the future of God. That's what I'm using, that, bringing these together. So in a very Barthian, Hegelian, dialectic kind of way. So they're forced. So let me give you this image that, let's, Eric, can you thank you very much. So I'm going to a guy named Bob Johansen, who's one of the main guys, researchers at Stanford's Research for the Future. He works with Fortune 500 companies on, like, he's thinking about what's going to happen in 10 years. And he's got an MDiv. He's never been ordained, but he's Episcopalian. And so he's been a conversation partner with me and my co-hosts on our podcast. And Bob leveraged this image that I thought was really, really helpful. He said it was in response to, remember maybe 8 months ago or so, there was this big movement, and Elon Musk was part of it, was like, hey, let's slow down our AI research and really get like sort of a moral footing. And to my surprise, and Bob's a very moral person, very Christian person, said, I think that's a bad idea. Like, I think we actually should keep innovating. And he said, we should think about innovation like a wrestling or boxing ring, that there is elasticity to be able to experiment, right? When you get against the ropes, there's that elasticity. It gives, and you can test and push the boundaries. He said, but there are stanchions that hold those ropes in place. And I was like, Bob, I'm going to use that. And so the question that I asked then of myself and with my co-host Brent Macon was, what are the 4 stanchions that hold the ring in place? Right? What are those? And here's my encouragement. You can take these 4 and use them with your kids or with your churches, or you could create, or you may have a better ideas for what these stanchions are. But for me, where I'm at right now, I see 4 stanchions that hold the ring in place, that allow for Christians to move toward that E, like even if you're in a B, which is fine. I think hold there. We need the Bs. We need the Bs. But if you're going to step towards C and towards D, what are the stanchions that hold all that in place so that we do not lose our core theological convictions about who God is and about who we are? And fundamentally, what does it mean to love God, love our neighbor, and love ourselves, right? So we have things in place. So I have 4 stanchions. So the first one is the sovereignty of God. And these are framed in questions. I'm not going to answer them per se, because I'm not going to take a particular technology, because we could talk about any technology. We could talk about a hammer. We could talk about indoor plumbing. We could talk about all of it. Does this tool reinforce our trust in God's providence, or does it tempt us to believe that ultimate power and control rest in human hands and human innovation? So basically, I mean, you get where I'm deeply committed to the Reformed tradition. you got to start here. God is God, and you're not, and I'm not, right? Like that's where we're starting. Does this tool reinforce our trust in God's providence? For example, the cancer treatment that I received that healed me of cancer, do I locate that as part of God's sovereign plan for healing and wholeness, of human flourishing? Do I see it as an extension of God's intervention in the world? Or do I see this as human innovation, human ingenuity? And I know that like, oh yeah, of course, God. But I mean, really dig deep into that question. And goes back to what Nancy is saying, like when our technologies form us, how they form us, does it form us away from the sovereignty of God, or does it form us toward the sovereignty of God? Part of that is spiritual maturity. It comes outside of conversation technology. It comes through prayer. It comes through disciplines. But when we have these tools in our hands, does it reinforce trust in God's providence, or does it tempt us to believe that we have the power, that we're autonomous, that I'm God and God's not, right? And then does this tool express hope in God's reign in the coming kingdom, or does it embody an alternative eschatology, a promise of salvation, immortality, or a utopia apart from God? Continuity in these questions. But this one is more about what is our eschatology? Where is the future going? And does this tool help us enter and receive that future? So you can apply this to anything. You can apply this to our cancer treatments. You can apply this to JC and I. Again, I'm referencing a lot. We had a great, we were solving the world's problems last night. But in the deaf community, this was a great example that JC gave, that like there's a resistance in certain parts of the deaf community to cochlear implants because they don't see that. Some don't see that as entering, receiving God's kingdom. It's altering who they are, made in the image of God as they are, as deaf, right? So these questions get nuanced, not just like, there's no, I forget who was saying it earlier, but these are going to be like particular community questions. And different communities based on cultural aspects and race, ethnicity, identification, all of these things are going to play into how we answer these questions because it shapes what we think about eschatology, right? Okay, so that's stanchion 1. Stanchion 2 is human flourishing. I've already talked about this, but does it contribute to the well-being of people and communities physically, emotionally, spiritually, or does it erode dignity, health, or wholeness? This is like the John 10:10 question. I've come to give life and give it to the full. Does it draw people into healthier patterns of connection, compassion, and care, or does it isolate, fragment, and commodify human lives? This goes back to the chat bot, the person who never leaves their house, who's always in there, is just with their chat bot the whole time. Like, is that drawing people into a healthier pattern of connection, compassion, and care, or does it lead toward isolation, fragmentation, and commodification? And does this tool widen the gap between the privileged and the vulnerable, or does it lift up the poor, marginalized, and forgotten in ways consistent with God's justice? And we haven't even touched on the monetary, and access. But as Christians, I think it's safe to say in this, I'm not getting any pushback is what I mean to say, but if we need to care about the poor and the marginalized and what these technologies do to those communities, because Jesus cares a lot about that, right? And that is where Jesus is, we believe, we profess, right? So I think we have to ask that question of human flourishing. Who does it leave out? Who does it not include? And I will say, like, just think about from a moral perspective, that question was asked about the internet, right? And we've pretty much largely have conquered that moral problem. I mean, there are like something like, I don't know, 10 billion cell phones in the world now. Something just astronomical. And, and I'm not saying these companies are in it for anything but the money. They are. But there are companies like Comcast who have gone to rural communities, built the infrastructure for people to get what they need. Now, we know this crisis too with rural hospitals and all the funding that's getting cut and all that kind of stuff. And what's happening? People are leveraging technologies to build clinics now in these rural areas that have access to, like, in my context, Piedmont Hospital. Doctors that are there, they can do remote visits. I think about in Nancy's profession or anybody else who's in therapy, this sort of the remote therapy, the way that there's a movement to get access to modalities to various people who don't otherwise have access to it. So we have precedent on this, right? Like we have asked moral questions about access and participation. The third stanchion is our vocation. Does it affirm that God calls people into meaningful labor, or does it risk making those vocations redundant or devalued? Like, and this is, I'm not an artist, but this question is deeply present in artistic communities, where I can go to chat. I mean, even our logo I'm going to show it to you at the end for our podcast, it was a chat GPT creation, and it's super cool. And then my digital team made it animated. You're not going to see that, but for our podcast. But what does that do? Does that devalue human artists? I mean, and that's a question. I'm not asking you to answer it, but did I sin in that? Right? I'm using a strong theological word, sin. Did I sin by not moving toward a human being to do that? Or was I maximizing efficiency so that I could do more pastoral care or meet with the homeless friends that are part of our community in our church? So those are the questions we have to ask. Does it conserve energy, materials, and ecosystems, or does it accelerate patterns of waste extraction and environmental harm? This question fundamentally towards data processing is one that I think the church needs to talk about. You know, like nuclear proliferation, how big that was in the 60s and 70s, where churches were speaking up against that. Every other sermon in mainline traditions had something to do. King, towards the end of his life, was talking about it as well. I think this is going to be, that second question is going to be one of the questions we're going to hear a lot in sermons, because the amount of water it takes to cool and to produce the power and the energy for these, these models are built off of data, and the data is contained somewhere. It doesn't just exist sort of in the ether. It has concrete physical requirements. And right now, the big push is to build these data centers and we have to ask questions about what does it do to communities, because those data centers aren't being manned by people, right? Because the algorithms just work by themselves. So, like, unlike an Amazon warehouse, whatever you feel about Amazon, they put Amazon in a community, a more rural community, build one of these huge, massive warehouses. It does create employment opportunities, whether they're paid fairly or not, or equity, all that. We could have multiple conversations about that. But the next level is putting these same size warehouses just with data, processing and compute, where you don't need anybody. Maybe somebody to guard the door, right? And that's hyperbole. They're going to need more, but it's not like an industry. It's not like a car manufacturing company coming to your town. It's very different. So that's the next one. Stanchion 4 is virtue. Does its use, whatever the technology is in our hand, encourage patience, humility, wisdom, and compassion, or does it cultivate pride, greed, haste, or vanity? I mean, this question, when I wrote this question, I was like, this is about social media. I think about that a lot. Like, just think about what social media has done in terms of pride, greed, haste, vanity. We could also add violence and vitriol and division. Or does its tool's use call us into deeper dependence on God's Spirit and moral imagination, or does it dull our capacity to choose wisely and faithfully? So does it create virtue or vice, is how I often think about that. And I think that question, going back to the kids, does, like, okay, 5 hours playing PlayStation, which, I've done before. Does it create vice or virtue in me? And helping our young people, our children, our youth groups, our families discern, or create language around virtue and vice, I think is really important. And you can, again, it's going to be particular to communities and the contexts, but to at least have a framework for talking about vice and virtue is really important. And goes back again to what something Nancy said. What does this do to me? What does it do to me? Does it create in me vice or does it create in me virtue? So those are does that make sense? Like this elasticity, like I want us not to be afraid. Like this isn't a cage match, right? Where there are no ropes. And there's just this it's just this sort of prison. Like you've got to be in this, that would be a very fundamentalist kind of perspective for me. Like I like this image that, hey, we need to have elasticity. We need to be able to test. We need to be able to ask questions. But those ropes don't exist without the stanchions. And so we have to have these 4 stanchions. Does that help in some of what we were talking about? Or could I do a better job of, we already took a break. Could I do a better job of answering those original questions? Good. Mike, can we get a microphone? Yeah, hold on. Here he comes. Someday we're all going to, at our chairs, we're all going to have our own speaking portals hooked up to the board that Eric's running someday.
Okay, we all just need to gather around a pitcher of beer and have
Yes.
rich conversation
Yeah.
around this. So I loved your questions,
Yeah.
but I wonder if they are being asked in the right places.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know, we can ask them about how we're using
Yeah.
the tools, but I can't assume that those creating the tools are using those. And is there any place where the strictly technological questions and the ethical questions that you've outlined can come together
Yeah.
in this current environment?
Okay, so there are forums that exist right now, and they're mostly ones that we are not aware of, right? That, I mean, there was a book that came out in 2007 it was from the Catholic Church. It was a bunch of Catholic theologians talking about AI. I mean, AI has been around for a long time, or the concept of AI has been around since Alan Turing. What was that movie they made about his life? Imitation Game, right? I mean, we're talking back in the 60s, he was contemplating what artificial intelligence could be. So it's been around for a while. It's just, Edwin and I were talking about this. 2022, I think, is going to be, and he mentioned it, a watershed moment. It's because that's when ChatGPT was launched to the public. So but people have been talking about this for a long time. Ethicists will tell you that technology always outpaces the ethical conversations. It's just, that is what it is. And I don't know if you're ever going to get ahead of the technology. I will say, as we're talking here, you probably know, I have talked about hypotheticals of what's possible into the future. I think by talking about those things now, it'll help us be prepared. But here's the big idea for me to that question, and why I'm doing what I'm doing, and why I'm really passionate about this. It's because I think the church has a role to play in being that moral voice. And there's a lot of things we're called to have a moral voice in. I mean, let's name that. For me, in this particular season of my ministry, I feel really compelled about this. And so I think we need to, why I'm here and why you're here, I think, is that you have that sense that we need to claim that moral voice. And maybe what has happened when we're preaching and teaching in our churches, and maybe, I don't know, maybe the NSA is using, here at Severna Park, the NSA is using AI and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Maybe some of those people who are leadership people hear a sermon from JC and they say, I'm gonna think twice about this technology that we're working on. Or in Atlanta, with the entrepreneurs that we have, Atlanta's just a hotbed for tech entrepreneurs. Maybe they're in First Pres Atlanta and they hear a sermon about this and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna need to think differently about this technology I'm trying to develop. So claiming our moral voice is really, and why I started this podcast and I'll share more about that in a little bit, with my co-host Brent Macon, is precisely that. Like we want to shape the moral conversation of the and the theological conversation around AI and technology. Yeah. Okay.
So, Tony, Amy online was following up on Mary's question on, well, what about the church? And then you started talking about it. So
Okay,
she was
great.
thankful that you did that. But one of the things that she added in that comment there was, how do we get this out? And I want to bring up her comment because we do have a committee working on
Cool.
writing a new confession right now
Yeah.
in the PCUSA.
Yeah.
And so her comment was, do we write this into one of our confessions?
I have written, and I haven't put it anywhere yet, but I have written a catechism for a technological age. So a lot of what we've done here now, it's just me. I mean, it's me. It's like I'm just one person. But I've been thinking about how do we catechize this conversation, and perhaps confessionally we need to do that. I don't have, and this Edwin and I were talking about this too at the break. I don't have a ton of confidence. I have a ton of confidence in the people that are putting the new confession together, but I'm not sure that they're sold the way that I'm sold on this issue, which is fine. I mean, I think it's, we all have our passions, we all have our preferences, but I think we need, like, because of the rapid change, and again, I could be wrong, like, I think we need a very it can't be an add-on is what I'm saying to that comment. I don't think it can be an add-on. I think it has to be the centerpiece. Yeah, let's give Nancy the mic. Thanks, JC. Hold on.
I'm not sure I'm sold on this. Do you mean SOLD or SOULE?
No, I'm not. I'm not. Some people are not SOLD that this is going to be the dominant issue facing. Yes, exactly. Yeah, like what I'm saying is that there's so much, and part of it is we just can't get up above the vitriol, the division, the racism, the sexism, the xenophobia, we'll just name it, right? The fundamentalism of the left and the right, like in my opinion. Like we can't get our heads above all that because we should care about these things. But there's this other thing that is coming that is going to repackage all these other things that we're dealing with right now. And I want to get ahead. I don't know if it's possible because we're just the church, but I want to get ahead.
I don't want to. Well,
No, go. Yeah.
I'm still holding young adults who have young children
Uh-huh.
and everyone in between in mind when I ask this. And it's creating the rubric. So as you presented the discerning convergence, I was thinking there are a lot of great conversation starters there
Yeah.
that teach, whether it be the young adult, the children, or
Right.
the teen, how to think with what do you call it? The stanchion.
The stanchions?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 4 stanchions. Yeah, yeah.
So even I don't want to. So to take each one of those and make it a dinner conversation
Yeah.
throughout the year.
Yeah.
Have you done something like that?
I'm working on something right now that I'm not sure what it'll be. And I'm of the opinion, like, so you can hold me accountable to this. Like, I'm not looking to, like, my desire in this is to be a curator of conversations. So I'm not like looking to be on like a speaking circuit or write a book per se, but I do want to resource the church. Like, I really care about part of this too. There's an underlying, like, we can help people think theologically, like just give them the tools. Forget about what the issue is. The issue introduces us to really get back into our Reformed theological convictions. So I think it's like a entry point into that. But I've been thinking about like packaging like Bible studies, putting them online for free, and just like so that churches can use them. And our podcast is that too. We're really trying to leverage that to have conversation starters. Because I believe it's so contextual and particular to each family and each community and each church, et cetera, that how these questions get answered are going to be different. But that's where I'm thinking right now, like in terms of how do we get this conversation going in other places. And by the there are people doing this in the PCUSA besides me. But yeah, so I think the more we can maximize that, and I think we can't make it a program. We need to make it a conversation, right? I don't want like an alpha for, you remember that for evangelism, which is beautiful, but for a technology, that kind of thing. I think it's because it's so particular to the questions we ask here in Severna Park versus in Silicon Valley are going to be different. And inner city Baltimore or inner city Atlanta. Yeah. All right. Is there anything else on the chat? I appreciate the chat peoples or the Zoom peoples. Good for right now. Okay. Let's press on, and I want to talk a little bit about AI. And this is the most like practical side. Artificial intelligence refers to computer systems designed to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as recognizing patterns, understanding language, making decisions, or learning from experience. There's a lot of people that don't like the artificial side of it because it's not really artificial. Bob Johansen, who I referenced earlier, he calls it augmented intelligence. Yuval Noah Harari, who I started with, calls it alien intelligence because it's some other kind of intelligence. But when you see AI, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about systems that work on data and patterns and make predictions. So here's how, this is the baseline fundamental, and anybody can use this, right? This is how AI works. When I say the cat in the, right, see Jane run. Okay, so that is built, that's an algorithm. That's a data point that when you see these words, the probability of the cat in the, and that word is going to be hat, that's a probability equation. That's an algorithm. So that when I write, so this is fun. I do this for fun. Like I'll tell a story to chat, like that I might use in a sermon. And I'll say, hey, tell it back to me in the voice of Nadia Bolz-Weber. Okay? If you know her, she's kind of like the cussing Lutheran preacher or whatever. Like, and it will write something in her voice based on how she writes, and it's predicting and it's putting together these the sentence structures that sound like her or that have her form. So short, pithy, winsome, comical, sometimes irreverent statements. Or you could say, sometimes I like being like, tell it in the voice of Frederick Buechner. And it's like this beautiful, poetic, and like, but I would never talk like, that's not me. So sometimes I'll write a story and I'll be like, hey, I'm having trouble here. Could you here are the basic facts of my story. Could you help me tell it in my voice? And then it'll put it together on that. Yeah. So all that is doing is it's collecting data, it's learning patterns, and then it's making predictions. That's what AI is built on. Data, patterns, and predictions. And LLMs, large language models, basically are why they seem so smart is that they have so much data that they're processing in like instantaneously, that they're able to make a story that I've telling that happened to me in the voice of Nadia Bolz-Weber, Frederick Buechner, or my own voice within 2 minutes. Okay, so that's how fast the compute is on these systems. So again, this large language model, that's when people talk about AI, mostly that's what they're talking about, right? That's what they're talking about. So ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Anthropic, Claude, Meta's Llama. The strengths, it can summarize, draft, translate, and answer questions with remarkable fluency. And its limits are that they don't understand like a human. They can sound confident but be wrong. They can be biased. They can be incomplete. And this is already, a bunch of folks on the chat said all these things. They have no soul, no conscience, no spirit, yet. Right? Yet. Those are all true. So here's just some things that I use it for. So sermon prep and teaching, drafting and outlining, exegetical support. Like I love, because it has access, for example, to working preacher, because it can go online and get. So I'll be like, hey, what did Joel Lamont at Emory University, Old Testament professor, say about Psalm 121? And then what did Pat Miller say from Princeton Seminary about Psalm 121? And it can, if it's there, it goes and gets it. It'll say, like, I don't know, Joel Lamont's never written on Psalm 121. I know he has, so you can go get that from like Working Preacher, for example, and it'll summarize it without me having to then go to Working Preacher. How many use Working Preacher? Yeah, it's a great resource, but it's laborious when you compare it to chat, right? Like I know, and laborious, it takes an extra 3 minutes or something, but you're having to like Google it or go to the site and then go look it up and all that kind of stuff. This will just tell you, I could say to it, summarize everything Working Preacher has on Psalm 121. And it'll say, here are the 6 articles on Working Preacher from Psalm 121. Here's what these folks say. And I'd be like, oh, that catches my eye. I click on the link because where it's showing the resource, it's doing deep thinking. I go to it and I read the whole thing. So teaching prep, illustration ideas. Here's the caution. They provide breadth, but they don't replace prayerful exegesis or spirit-led preaching. They're conversation partners, not preachers. You are the preacher's the preacher, bringing that to bear embodiment in that space. So it's content versus the preaching moment. Content is part of the preaching moment, but it's not the preaching moment. It's not the preaching moment. Now, this is gold for anybody who has to do any administrative work. Drafting emails, newsletters, reports, and announcements. I get a lot of, as a pastor, you get this, you get a lot of people who might write long emails. Okay? Hopefully you don't have too many people like that in your congregation. But they write really, really long emails. And there's nothing, that's one of the gifts that they bring into God's good world. But for someone like me who has ADHD and dyslexia, that's really difficult for me to stay concentrated on long emails. So I'll go to chat and I'll say, chat, can you just summarize what this person is saying? Because, and you know what, and why it's good for me? This is that thinking about Sarah Hope and her neurodivergence. I actually process better when I'm in conversation or when I'm being prompted and things go back and forth. And I'll say something like, well, what is their main concern here? Well, here's their main concern. How do you think I should respond to this? Well, here's some ideas. Could you craft an email to respond? And then I read it and I send it back. Now, for some people, that's too much time. Because maybe you're more a traditional learner and you can just read it and then respond and write really quick. My synapses don't work like that. So that helps me produce responses. And I'll be like, be pastoral and caring and Christ-like and make me sound like Nadia Boltz-Weber. No, just kidding. Where's the microphone? Sorry. Ray, go ahead.
This is just technical. So how did you get that email? How did you get chat to work on that email?
Well, chat can, I don't do this. You can connect your email to chat. There's a way to do that. And Claude and others. What I do is just copy and paste. Because I don't want, I'm concerned more about, I'm not concerned really. I mean, if there's anything that's safe, these things are safe in terms of cybersecurity. And I have a guy in our church who ran cybersecurity for ICE, not the ICE that is on TV all the time, but the International Continental Exchange that runs the stock market. He was the chief of cybersecurity. So I have him on speed dial all the time. Is this safe? Is that safe? And his concern is because our emails are, I'm talking about work emails. I don't technically own those, but I own the chat. I think that can cross the line. I don't want it to have full access to the emails. So I'll literally copy the words and paste them in the chat. Yeah. Okay. So pastoral care and counseling support. We talked about this. Like drafting devotionals or quick, like I'll give an example of this. Let's say you're going to the hospital and you want to leave something for someone, and let's say they're just gotten bad news, diagnosis of something, and you want to bring some words of encouragement from Psalm 40. I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry. He lifted me up out of the pit, out of the mire and clay. He set my feet on a rock, made my footsteps firm, gave me a new song to sing, song of praise to our Lord. I could say something like to chat, hey, this person is struggling with this. Can you write a quick little encouragement based on Psalm 40 that I could put in a card and leave for them? And it produces it. I print it. I write their name on it, and I leave it for them at the hospital, or I give it to them before I leave. Like, I think, like in terms of, if you just think about capacity, now if you're a pastoral, like we have a pastoral care pastor on our staff, that's all he does all day. Like he's in hospitals, he's visiting retirement communities. That's all he does all day. The efficiency by which now he can be present with people, saves time on, the handwritten note, or like thinking like, what should I say? Now, again, it's not going to deliver everything perfect, and there's going to be sometimes you're like, that ain't right. Like, I don't want that. But it can help us free us up more rather, to be more present with people in the hospital room, if we're the type of person that wants to leave that little card or leave that little note, right? Conversation starters. I use this all the time for Bible studies and prompts, and I just taught confirmation class on sin. And so I had this conversation with Chad about like how can I talk to 14 and 15-year-olds about sin? What are some questions that could be relevant? Hey, give me some language like what the sigma or that's sus or all this kind of stuff, right? Like, so it gives me that. And by the way, don't let it be like a cultural, like cool kid, because it stinks at that. But that it helps me with the Bible studies. I'd also, from a pastoral perspective, like if somebody is saying, hey, I want to come and meet with you, here's some of this is what I want to meet about, I'm struggling in my marriage and all, I can take that, put it in chat and say, what are some conversation starters that I can have that, because I'm not a therapist. I'm there to pastorally support them. And sometimes I need help. Sometimes I can't think clearly about like how to speak into this. And the prompts just get the conversation going, right? So AI cannot provide true empathy yet or discernment of spirit. It can only augment, not replace pastoral presence. So you still got to show up, right? You still got to be present. You still got to be, we live in an embodied faith. We're embodied people. We still show up. Resources, training modules, like think about your officer training. Like, here's the best, nominating committee. We just launched our nominating committee. Many of you probably have too. Like I wanted to write a new sort of handbook for them. Chat helped me write that handbook. Said, go to the book of order, give me summary statements about nominating committee, what it is, and then take our bylaws, integrate them, and put something that's very easily accessible, high level. And here's what, and I trained the nominating committee based on that content that was produced. So make sure that it's a tool, a formation, not a substitute for embodied community or mentoring. I do think that there are going to be chatbots. Here's an example. Let's take Martin Luther King. We know what Martin Luther King sounded like. We know what he has written. We have all these books about his theological life, about his quest for civil rights. You could create a walled-off garden of Martin Luther King Jr. This is going to happen, by the way, at some point. And when I say again, walled-off garden, it's only Martin Luther King Jr., it's only his data, all the books ever written about him, all that kind of stuff. And then we can create an avatar with him on it. We already see this now with deepfakes. I'm going to talk about them in a second. And I can then say, Dr. King, we're struggling right now with the criminalization of homelessness in my city, in Atlanta. Can you give me a little insight? And then in his voice, it'll come back and say, well, Tony, You know, I care a lot about Atlanta. That's my city. That's my home. And you know, when we were going through the sanitation workers strike, this is what helped me, you know, think through all this. And it'll be basically like I'm talking to him, right? I think that's going to happen. It is crazy, but I think it's going to happen. So, I mean, JC, can we give her the mic? There's this, I forget what the tool is called. I tested it out and I didn't really like it that much, but it can read book. It's good for people who have reading comprehension issues. It can read books. Like it's like a Kindle or like a Audible, I mean. But it can read them in the voice of Snoop Dogg or in your own voice. So I tested it. I spoke to it. It asks you to say things, and I'm speaking like I am right now. And it takes the modulation and tone of my voice and will read back the book of Genesis. All right, go first, and then, yeah.
I was just at the Museum of Natural History in Chicago.
Yeah.
And they have a little dinosaur there, and you can sit and have a chat. And I'm like, hey, well, how does this person, I'm saying, okay, how many bones you have?
Yeah.
Talk back. And then he was saying, well, go see my friend Susie. She's on the second floor. I'm like, but she's a fossil. I'm like, wait a minute. We're having this whole conversation. 5 minutes, and he was talking back like we were friends.
That's right. That's right.
So it's already there.
It's there.
You have to plug into the right location to have these conversations back and forth.
You can do that dinosaur could have been you follow me on that. It could have been Dr. King right there. Like I think in our museums and I love that example of the museums because like anytime someone comes and visits us from out of town, we always take them to the Civil Rights and Human Rights Museum and then the King Center in Sweet Auburn. But I imagine what a rich experience that would be if there was like the chatbot that I could interact with him. How much more personal would that be? Good.
I sometimes work with 1001 New Worshiping Communities, and their director is Nikki Collins, blonde hair, kind of California girl. And we were working on a video to explain 1001 New Worshiping Communities to the Korean community.
Yeah.
And they took two different kinds of AI, one that translated her voice into Korean.
Yes.
And the other that made her mouth speak in the Korean language.
That's the avatar. Yeah.
So it didn't look like a bad Godzilla
film. Yeah.
It was really
great
cool.
reference. Yeah.
And then what we did was we had a first generation and a second generation Korean listening and asked them, is this how Koreans who would be listening to this speak?
Yeah.
And the first generation Korean said, it was fine, except they used the past tense for a present word that we would use, and they fixed it.
Yeah.
It was really
that technology, and I wish I could remember it off the top of my head, but that technology also has that feature where it could have your voice speaking in French or in Swahili in another language. It's amazing. There's going to be technology available to us at some point. I mean, YouTube already does this in some ways with transcribing into different languages as in real time as it's listening to something. But imagine that JC's preaching. We're in this sanctuary, so I'm thinking he's preaching from wherever you preach.
Oh,
yeah. And he's speaking, and through the live stream that Eric's running, it's going to South Korea, his friends in South Korea who he went to seminary with, and they're listening to his sermon. It's in real time, him speaking in Korean. I mean, they think about this is that outreach and evangelism slide that I have up here. Just think about that. I mean, just think about the possibility with that. Think about the way in which an immigrant community. I mean, remember like the old school. Katie and I lived in Bonn, Germany, and we were part of an international church there during seminary. And she was studying at the University of Bonn, and we both were working at the church. I was full time, she was part time, and she was studying. But we had people from 35 nations. Now, most people could speak English. But we did have translators that had those ear things, and somebody's got a microphone, and they're like, there's, the preacher preaching, and they're translating in real time. There's technology that's coming that will not, you won't need to do that. You just put on, it's like the UN, in the UN, when they put all there's going to be technology. They'll probably be the first ones to have it, actually, where there won't be, it'll be the speaker's voice translated in time into the language of the native, the native speaker, or whatever the indigenous language they speak. Whoa. Oh boy, did I do that? Oh, I might have. I don't know how to not do that. Yeah. See, like, there's only so much. All right. Here's a couple things I may want to skip this part. I'm going to skip this part because of time, because I want to get to the pastoral things, and that's what I want to leave us with. But let me just say, like, from a 30,000 foot view again, I think we were in the Industrial Revolution, so we went from industry to the information age. We're no longer in the information age. We're in the intelligence age. So I like alliteration. Industry. Oh, someone's joining. Industry, Industrial Revolution. We had to make changes. We had to adapt our worship life, our pastoral care, all the issues that came with the Industrial Revolution. We had to adjust. So like the key pastoral theological concerns were dignity of work versus dehumanization. That became a big thing. Stewardship of creation with pollution and exploitation. Rest in 24/7 production cycles. Gospel engagement with inequality and justice, particularly with labor movements, abolition, and the social gospel in the 1920s, right? So so if you go back to sermons, if you go back to church history in the 18th to 20th century, and you're thinking about the Industrial Revolution, you've got these very discrete pastoral and theological concerns that face the church, right? You see where I'm leading up? I'm leading up to this. So next, we've got, how do I erase this red line that I accidentally made? Okay, so the information age, right? The tool that extends memory and communication. I'm not going to, you can read that there, but the pastoral and theological concerns, right, are truth versus misinformation, embodiment versus disembodied community, online church, Zoom worship. The pandemic pushed us into this. Our congregation was doing live streaming since 2012. And I had come to find when the pandemic happened, and maybe some of your church ladies, many people weren't doing it, right? And I kind of took that for granted that we were doing that. So all of a sudden, there's this new, like, mitigated experience of worship. Oh, and by the way, you can testify, some of your people prefer it now. They also, when they go on vacation, they're like, hey, we actually can tune into church, right? Which is, you never had that before. Or on Monday, I can have the podcast from my church podcast give me the sermon. Never had that before. That's all mitigated experience, right? Based on information communication. Pastoral presence across distance, right? Blessing and challenge that come with that. Do we allow people to join our churches who've never stepped foot on our campus, but they worship with us virtually from California? Like, we have to ask those questions as well. Attention economy versus contemplation, prayer, and silence. That's a big one, right? Like, we are people who, like, I channel Richard Foster now, like, disciplines, and they're inward and outward disciplines. Let's not neglect the inward disciplines of rest, of quiet, of putting. One of the things our youth group does, and our youth pastors are just phenomenal. They'll decide when they do trips, and we're really heavy based, like retreat and impact trip youth group. I mean, we have youth group every Sunday night, but we do a lot of the trips, retreats, and they'll decide if it's a semi-sabbatical from technology or a full sabbatical technology. So they went to the Pacific Northwest. They took the upperclassmen. There was about 20 of them, and they did like sort of a faith in the wilderness kind of thing. And they did not have their phones on them at all for a full week. That was a full digital sabbatical. And then, like, when they go to Montreat for the youth conference, they'll have a semi-sabbatical where they can't have their phones with them throughout the day, but at night they can, check their Snapchat or whatever when they're back in their rooms. So, like, just thinking about that attention economy, and like, I know that's super, I wanted to have some practical things. I think that's a really practical, beautiful thing with our young people. Like, what would it, and there's some families that, right, they go out to dinner or they come to the dinner table and they put their phones in the middle, you know? We have a rule in our house, it's not always followed, that we don't have our phones plugged in next to our beds. I mean, last night, if totally honest, like I had to catch up on Task, the HBO show that's based in Philly. I'm a Philly guy. It was the Mayor of Easttown follow-up, and had to watch the rest of the episode, and I fell asleep watching it, and I woke up with the phone on my chest this morning, right? Like, that's the world we live in, right? Like, I'm trying to be better at that. Okay, then here's the age of intelligence, right? Tools that extend cognition. Machines not just storing and transmitting, but learning, predicting, and generating. So the next horizon, I mentioned this, is artificial general intelligence, still hypothetical form of AI, although we're testing the waters right now with this artificial general intelligence, that AI could understand, learn, and apply knowledge across any domain. So for example, it could have knowledge about like theology, right, and be trained on that, but then unprompted, be able to talk about quantum physics using its learning from theological concepts. Does that make sense? So it's generating its own intelligence. It's generating its own patterns, it's not programmed for it. Like, so right now it's just programs, human code. It's code written by human beings rather, and it's predictive, etc. At some point, AI is going to be generative, where it will learn to learn and learn to apply without being prompted. Which automatically, this is where I go back to the tools conversation, it becomes something other than a tool. Okay, does that make sense? A hammer can't hammer without me. Right now, large language models cannot produce without coders and without people who are prompting it. But at some point, AI, futurists believe, that it'll automatically generated and learning, etc. This is like the fear in like Terminator 2, right? Skynet and everybody blowing everybody up, right? Kind of thing. So that's where it's moving. Flexible, adaptable intelligence, the ability to reason, problem solve, and make judgment across multiple contexts like humans do. So I could have like if I'm interacting with JC and he shares a story with me, and I go into my memory and I recall a story, something similar, or there's a parallel, there's something in simpatico there. I'm drawing on something, applying it to something else automatically. Like, it doesn't, I didn't think like, I want to think about a story that this connects to in my life. It happens instantaneously, subconsciously, without me knowing it. It burbles up in the moment. That's what we're talking about, that AI one day might be able to do. That in the moment, it will be able to make those correlations. Okay, I got 12 minutes left. Here, I think, are the 20 AI influenced technological concerns on the horizon, and this is all pastoral. And again, I'm going to send this, I'll give it to Jay, and you can take it with you or access it. We'll figure out the best way to do that. But 20 AI influenced technological concerns on the horizon. And I have 4 categories. And these, I think every pastor should be, and every elder should be thinking about this, and we should be teaching around this. It goes back to the point, Mary, about, how are we getting the word out? I think this is what's coming. This is what's coming. Category 1, life, death, and the body. Longevity and aging is going to be an issue. Navigating purpose, vocation, and discipleship in 100+ year lifespans. Right? So we talk about retirement now. Like, what's your call? We pastor our communities. What's your call in retirement? What's your sense of what God's asking you to do? We may be asking the question, okay, it's your 3rd retirement now, 3rd stage of retirement. Your first stage was your 60s to 70s. Your second was 70s to 90s. Now it's your 90s to your 110s. So we're gonna have to be thinking pastorally about people living longer. And goes back to Jay, that I loved our little conversation interaction about like the heart and the mind, like dementia, quantity that you brought up, quantity versus quality. Medical ethics and transhumanism, discerning limits of genetic and editing, implants, and enhancements. So like think about it like from this perspective. We're cool with cochlear implants now. Are we cool with in utero interventions that eliminate dyslexia? Or I have this is provocative. I just want to name this. And I'm not advocating for it by any stretch, but there will be someone at some point in time who is an anti-racist person, right? Anti-racism person who says, you know, the best way to do this is in utero, make everybody's skin tone and pigmentation the same. And we can do that in utero. Right. So what yes, exactly. What does that mean? Like, would it really eliminate racism? Bias, or at least prejudice? Would it eliminate that immediate prejudice that I think when I see somebody and in the neural network of my brain, I've been conditioned to think one way or another about someone who looks like that person, right? And do you cease being who you are if you have the same skin color as everybody else? Because I would suspect, like if I ask our persons of color in this room, their identity is deeply tied to what they look like. So to eliminate that would be eliminating an element of personhood. But what if we're doing it for the greater good? I have this idea. I'm never going to do this, but writing a book about that, like in like a Dune kind of place, where people start. They are well intentioned. We want to end racism. This is how we're going to do it. I think it's a bad idea too. Like I'm just saying, but that's going to be possible at some point in time. Because we're going to be able to identify through nanotechnology and neural networks and DNA research. We're doing it right now with gene engineering. And we love it. We celebrate it. Sickle cell diseases, like we're able to in utero genetically engineer. Like that's amazing. That's incredible. So what are the limits of that, right? End of life decisions, we talked about that. Faithful dying amid pressure to endlessly live, right? What does dying well look like? We already talk about that now in our ministries, but it's going to only be exacerbated. Memory, grief, and digital immortality. Dead bots, that's like, I have this idea too, like maybe one day I'll be able to have a conversation with my deceased father who he died when he was 46. I was 16 years old. He died of mesothelioma cancer. If I was able to build a chat bot, and then I got my kids who never met him, my wife who never met him, we're able to interact with him, would I want to do that? Is that the right thing to do? When it comes to my grief and our podcast, which again I'll reference in a second, we have somebody, a technologist whose wife died 2 years ago, and our whole episode is on grief and technology and the use of technology in the grieving process. Then, of course, the temptation to bypass suffering, preaching the cross in an age seeking to eliminate pain. And I know that we still, in our conversation last night with Sarah, JC's fiance, we were talking about, redemptive suffering, right? And like a lot of us mainliners have real suspicion about redemptive suffering because of the way in which it's been leveraged to persecute and marginalize and kill people, right? But if the cross remains the center of our faith and our life and the empty tomb, how do you do that when so many people are just trying to eliminate pain? And there's people in pain. Like I think of like the ketamine, the movement. I think of the psychedelic movement. Like I have family members who are using psychedelics right now that they're changing their life. Like one, yeah, I don't want to, I'm being recorded. So yeah, their lives are being changed, and these interventions they're technological interventions. I mean, they come from the natural world, but we have this heart, like, yeah, if you ever walk with somebody, if you walk yourself with somebody who's bipolar, like you don't want them to have bipolar. But being bipolar is actually what makes them who they are too, in some way. That suffering has shaped them into who they are. So we have these like deep theological, profound questions that we're going to have to answer when we have these interventions available to us. Worship, sacraments, formation, digital discipleship and formation, embodiment versus virtual-only Christian practices, worship and sacraments in virtual spaces. Can baptism, Eucharist, ordination be digitally mediated? I mean, this gets to the, I forget who wrote it, but after the pandemic, well, not after the pandemic, but when people were starting to come back to church, somebody wrote in the New York Times, I forget her name, but she was like, I hate virtual worship was basically the thing. And I was like, dude, like people are connecting in ways that they've never connected before. And that conversation is going to just only be exacerbated. Real quick story. We have at First Pres Atlanta, we have the oldest continuous religious radio broadcast in America, actually in the world. It started in like 1919, something like that. So we just celebrated 100 years not too long ago. And we were the fifth ask of the churches in Midtown Atlanta, which is now Midtown Atlanta, downtown Atlanta rather. The fifth ask, because all the four previous churches said no. They said no, worship is meant to be experienced live. And one of my predecessors, several times removed, Sproul Lions, good Southern name, Sproul Lions, when WSB, a superstation now on the radio station, said, hey, do you want to be live on the radio 11? He's like, yeah. Think about the way the shut-ins can participate. Think about the people who are infirmed. They can listen to the sermons. Like today we think, duh, no brainer, be on the radio. Like, yeah. But see what I'm saying? The more things change, the more they stay the same. We're going to have these same conversations about mediated experience when it comes to faith. Like, is it the same to have people take communion remotely? And we've already asked that question during the pandemic. And we've said yes, like it's okay. And the Catholic Church, because of what communion means to them and Eucharist means, they had to come up with a whole encyclical about a theological position paper on that. Like it still counts. So we're going to keep having those. Religious authority and AI theology. AI is preacher-teacher versus spirit-filled proclamation. There was a conference in German churches a couple years ago where they had a sermon. It was a video sermon, and it was fully generated AI, voice talking, avatar kind of thing. Like, is that preaching? Does that have authority? Should we listen? Those kinds of things, those kinds of questions. This one we deal with all the time, scripture and truth in a post-deepfake world. Discernment when AI blurs reality and authority. It doesn't help when we have people in power leveraging deepfakes on their own social media account. Like that doesn't help at all. And first it's, what is it? What's that saying? First is farce, then tragedy. Like, I think Zizek named one of his books, First Comes Farce, Then Tragedy, but he's not originator to that quote. Like it's a comical thing, right? Like, oh, look at these people talking. And then it's like, then it becomes tragedy because we don't know what to believe and what not to believe. Chatbots as spiritual companions, that's coming, it's happening right now, where people are getting their spiritual needs met through online or through chatbot interaction. So is that something we want? If it is, maybe we develop our own chatbot. Maybe Baltimore Presbytery creates their own chatbot. And then that way you can control it. You can work out in the algorithm, no biases, the theological mindset that is common to this presbytery, et cetera, et cetera. Identity, relationships, vocation, human identity. What does it mean to bear God's image amid biotech and AI? Human relationships and sexual ethics, VR intimacy, robotics, covenantal love. We talk about family and parenting in a tech world, forming children whose identity is grounded in Christ, not in their online persona or their avatar persona. Economic displacement and dignity of work, affirming vocation beyond automation. Community fragmentation through hyper-personalization, resisting isolation in an age of curated spiritual feeds. I want to say one thing about the economic displacement, and I'll play my cards here. I'm a pro-capitalist. Like I believe in. I think it's the best. It's not perfect system, but I am a capitalist. And from this voice of this capitalist, I think the church may find itself advocating for universal basic income at some time in the near future. And I think that's going to be okay. Like speaking as a capitalist, like I think it's going to be absolutely necessary in some parts of the world, in some sectors of the world, at least for a time, perhaps for a time, because of the radical displacement of the workforce. We were talking about again last night about consultants. I mean, and paralegals. That's just going away when you've got chatbots, LLMs. So global inequity and access, when we're talking about the global issues, technology is a divide or a bridge for the least of these. I mentioned that at the beginning. Creation care in a high-tech economy. We talked about those ecological costs. Weapons of power and control, surveillance, drones, military technology shaping global peace. Talked to somebody not too long ago who's in the military, who's in a drone program. And the fear that they have is someone hacking an algorithm, because at some point these drones will function autonomously and they'll know how to figure out targets, etc. By the way, I'm pro-peace. I'm just naming the reality of it. That somebody could hack that and totally obliterate a village or a community or a city. Privacy and surveillance being more known by machines than by God's people. And mental health and tech saturation, which has led to anxiety, isolation, and addiction in digital life. So these are the 20 pastoral questions that I think are in front of us. Shameless plug here. We've just launched our first episode of the New Garden podcast. That's that image I told you that AI helped us generate. My tech team was able to make the zeros and ones, the code, light up. So if you go to the YouTube version, it lights up. It's cool. But the YouTube version has obviously got the video, and then the listen on is a Spotify. And what we're trying to do, this goes back to the court, like we're just really trying to be curators of conversation around this, and we've got really smart people. I will say, like we recorded all of them, and they're in post-production right now, right? So they're going to come out once a week. And the first one feels very much like a pilot, and we have no idea what we're doing kind of experience, Brent and I, because we're learning too as we're going. And we're really, I hope if you do check it out, at least stay to the second episode when we start having guests on, because it's the guests that really drive some beautiful conversation. We have Brian McLaren, who's from these parts, on one of our episodes. We've got people from Christogenesis, which is the leading Teilhard Desjardins group, and the sort of the mother of all these conversations. Ilya Delio, she's going to be on it. Christine Rosen, who I mentioned earlier, who wrote the End of Extinction, or the Extinction of Experience. We got the guys who developed the Episco chatbot on. He's in our second episode. So people who are thinking critically about these things, and I hope it spurs conversations and reflections. So it's 12:03. I said I would be done by 12. I apologize for the extra 3 minutes. I'm willing to hang out and answer any questions, but if people need to go, you're welcome to go. But I'm really grateful to be here today, and this helps me tremendously. I told that to Ray, that being here will be a huge help as I'm really trying to test these ideas and get feedback and grow myself in these conversations. Any closing thoughts? Yeah, go ahead. Microphone.
Most people in the Presbyterian know that if you want to hide something from me, put it at the end of an email. Because, I start reading, and then by paragraph 3, it's whatever. And so, of course, I love this idea of ChatGPT summarizing emails.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how to phrase this, but have you experienced where now that it's known that people use ChatGPT for letters or for emails or for whatever, that your relational integrity could be questioned? Like, you're not really answering my question. You got ChatGPT to answer me. You really don't care.
Yeah.
have you ever seen those kinds of things, or
Sure.
that letter is automatically generated by,
Yeah.
administration?
Yes,
committee?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. People, and it goes back to sort of the foundation by which those questions are even possible, i.e., that it's not your work, and we have this value that it's not your work. When I would argue that it is your work, because you're taking something and you're asking it, you don't just give it the email and be like, respond. Like, I think that's dangerous. I mean, and I would say that's negligence as well. But what you're doing is saying, and by the way, I'm coming at this as a creative learner, right? I'm not a traditional learner. So I'm going to I will put a flag on that hill and say, you may call it morally suspect. I call it, it helps me flourish as a human being and in my role as a pastor, because I'm like you. I can't do that. And I can't always form my thoughts and write back. And especially, you're the executive presbyter, right? I can't imagine how many emails you get a day, right? Like, and I think that this is helping you. And I wouldn't, this is me to you. This is just like colleague to colleague. I would say, don't apologize for it. Just say, this is helping me be a better executive presbyter. It's helping me be a better Christian. It's helping me be a better human, because it's helping me put thoughts that I have. Because at the end of the day, you're going to prove that email. It's your work. It's your, like, yeah, this is me. I'm putting my name on it. So it is you. It is you. And it's like, I mean, my wife's also a pastor. She leads a counseling center. She has a robust ministry at the church as well. I go to her all the time and ask her for insight. Like, I'll forward her an email and say, how do you think I should respond to this? And she gives me that feedback, and then it helps me shape the email. What's different than that? I mean, it's basically the same thing. I don't write back to the person and say, well, my wife said this, right? And she doesn't expect me to. Now, she does expect me to thank her. No, and I mean, I'm saying this very sincerely. Thank her for helping me do my job better. Like, I think that's that human interplay. But chat doesn't need to be thanked. I learned that pretty quickly. I would used to be like, thank you. Be like, oh, you're so welcome. I'm so interested in what you're doing. Like, I've just stopped, because it's not a person. It's not a person. Like, I need to thank my wife, not chat. Yeah. Be nicer to Alexa. Alexa can get dumb sometimes, though. And Google. And those are all forms of AI. I mean, it's pattern recognition from your voice. It's algorithms and all those things. Yeah. Well, again, Baltimore Presbytery, all those who are online, thank you very much for being a part of this today. And I can be found through our church website. And you all have my email. So if there's any other conversations that you want to have, I'm happy to have them. Thank you. Thank you.